Okay, so 5 o'clock and 1 minute in Switzerland. I think we should start this event. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good evening. So again, welcome to this event on the next step on developing UN sustainability indicators with the ranking agencies. This is part 2, where we'll have the pleasure of listening to QS in a minute, as we did last week with the Times Higher Education. We had about 120 registered participants from 30 countries. In the morning session today, we had 60 participants, so I think we should reach a similar number today despite the American election. So thank you all for joining. I'll go to my next slide. So my name is Alexander. I work at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne as an institutional data manager. I will be one of your 2 moderators today, together with Christina von Oelreich. Christina?
Yes, thank you so much. I also would like to welcome you all to this meeting. I'm really looking forward to have very good and interesting discussions together with you. I'm working as the Sustainability Manager at KTH, the Royal Institute of Technology, Sweden in Stockholm. So welcome all.
Thank you, Christina. A few words on the Zoom webinar functions first. We would strongly advise you to use the side-by-side mode in the view option that you have on the top of your screen. And please use the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. And please vote for questions that you find interesting, since we won't take any question orally today. So we will really rely on the questions that you will write to us through the Q&A box. Last week with Times Higher Education, we ran this 60 minutes Q&A session. Since Times Impact Ranking has already been established for a couple of years, and you all had very specific questions to address. Today, the program will be slightly different. After the quick introduction, we'll have the pleasure of listening to QS for about 30-40 minutes, and then we'll take your questions for about a quarter and about 15 minutes before concluding and talking about the next steps. So today we'll have the pleasure of listening to Lee Kamerlins, Head of Evaluation at QS. Sorry, Lee, for my very terrible accent, so I hope I didn't distort your name too much. Andrew McFarlane, Ranking Manager, and Danielle Kahn, who's very much involved with research and rankings, and especially the subject, the topic that will be presented to you guys today. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much, QS, for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much for having us here today as well, and thank you all for coming along. So we are currently exploring how QS is going to address questions around sustainability through our different evaluations. So we're going to sort of talk a little bit about what our first steps are going to be in that space. And then really, we're hoping to use this as an opportunity to open a dialogue with all of you to really understand what your needs for information are and really help us shape what our next steps in assessing how universities are performing, operating in this area are. So I'll start off by introducing us. So as Alexander mentioned, my name is Lee Kamerlins. I'm the Head of Evaluation at QS. I'm responsible for the rankings activities we do, as well as evaluations through other quality frameworks. And my particular focus with a lot of this work is really around governance of our approaches and the design of different frameworks. I've also got here today with me my colleague Drew. Drew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Hi, I'm Drew McFarlane, the Rankings Manager here at QS.
And we also have with us Daniel. Daniel, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Daniel. I've been working at QS for 13 years, and I'm very focused on business school research rankings. At the moment, I've got my head in SDG issues as well. So.
Okay, so what we're going to cover in today's session, I'm going to start off talking a bit about QS's mission, some background to our rankings and the types of audiences we're trying to serve with those. I realize there's a diversity of people attending this session. Some of you will be quite familiar with this already. For some of you, this may be newer information that you're not as familiar with. I'll just make sure everyone has the same background there. We're going to talk about some of the insights we've got from students and academics and other stakeholders, which have really guided our approaches with rankings and starting to shape what we're doing going forward. So we'll share some of the background to that. And then we're going to talk a bit about what QS is already doing and what we're proposing on doing over future years in this space. At the end, we'll have times for any questions, and we'd like to sort of pose some questions back to you as well that you can think about and perhaps feed into us. So QS was established as a company in 1990. From the beginning, we've had this mission, which is to enable motivated people anywhere in the world to fulfill their potential by fostering educational achievement, international mobility, and career development. This has meant that real focus of our audiences from the inception of the company has really been on providing information for prospective students, specifically students who are looking to study abroad internationally. So when we started developing our rankings in 2004, this particular audience was really in mind, and that's really from the start shaped the types of metrics we're looking at, and this continues to be one of our real core audiences with all of the different performance insights we provide. We do also have these other audiences which are equally important that now engage with our work, and we are sort of trying to find the right balance of serving both of these needs, although our historic sort of where we're coming through from with things is really this prospective student information for those types of stakeholders. So just a quick history of the evolution of QS's rankings. So we created our first World University Rankings in 2004. There was about 200 institutions in that. There's now 1,000. In 2011, we started creating subject level rankings with 26 subjects in the first edition. Graduate employability rankings came in 2015 to look at performance through a slightly different lens. And then in 2017, we started looking at program level rankings in the business school space, so looking at MBA rankings, also looking at specialized master's programs. For anyone who's interested, today we actually launched the ranking focusing on different specializations within the MBA stream as well. We started looking at country and location based rankings in 2018, looking at India, mainland China, and some other countries in the world. And then, well, this year we now have subject rankings in 53 different subjects, and we directly through our websites reaching an audience of about 70 million visitors. This is predominantly a student audience, and our estimates are that we're reaching several 100 million through the different connected media channels and so forth that we are engaged with. So one thing we do know is a lot of students are still utilizing our information to guide their decision making. QS produces lots of different rankings. We see these as different tools with different purposes to guide different sort of stages of decision making, and looking at rankings, looking at universities operating in different contexts. So just to give you a bit of an overview of our rankings portfolio, we have a series of regional rankings looking at different parts of the world. We have those subject level rankings, and I realize there's an inconsistency in my slides. It's actually 53 subject areas. we're also looking at those different program level rankings in the business school space that I was talking about before. We have created some contextual rankings, looking, a big part of this is the best student cities ranking, which looks at different cities around the world and what the student experience is like for students studying there, to guide students in that aspect of their decision making. We have some mission-based rankings. The key part of this is a graduate employability ranking. And then we have different ways of classifying universities that allow our users of this information to really navigate it in a slightly different way, looking at different types of universities. So in the QS approach to evaluating university performance, we structure it around 4 pillars, which we have been guided in their development by our academic advisory board, and that we really see as the key pillars of what makes up a world-class university. So key aspects of that type of performance look at research, teaching, we look at the international perspective of the university, and unlike most of our competitors in the ranking space, we also look in more depth at the employability space. And for that student-focused audience, this is one of the key motivators in their decision-making is what their study options are going to lead on to further in future in life. So that's something that has been, it's a real core component of what we do. Our methodology for our World University Rankings has been in the top level methodology has been in place since the first ranking in 2004. It's been consistent over that period and tends to produce relatively stable results. Underlying some of the calculations and some of the methods we use ensure that universities specializing in particular disciplines don't receive unfair advantage on that basis. And we do have quite a low dependence on self-reported data in our methodology, which really helps to create that independence of the research. So we look at these 6 indicators, looking at academic reputation and employer reputation. So these are formed from a series of surveys that we run where we ask academics and employers to provide us insight into the universities they think are doing the best in the fields that they're engaging with. We look at faculty-student ratio as a bit of a proxy for the sort of teaching and learning experience for students and how personalized their experience is likely to be. We look at research metrics through the citations per faculty lens, and then we look at 2 internationalization metrics, looking at international faculty and international students. This gives a bit of a perspective on how international the experience is likely to be for a student studying in that university. So I'm going to hand over to my colleague Daniel, who's going to give us some insights from different stakeholders that have really sort of fed into what our approach is going to be going forward.
Thank you, Lee. Yes, so Lee's described a little bit about the history of our rankings and the evolution of the rankings and the ranking methodology. But I've been hearing a lot over the past few years of why we're not including SDG measures in our rankings, why we're not doing more in that realm. So these days you don't do anything without data. And to convince people internally, I think we have to look at what data we're sitting on, what data we can get to show that actually what we're doing is correct, and to move forward, we need data to make these decisions. So looking at the graph in front of you, which is showing the results of a question which was asked to over 78,000 international students, respective international students, and that's part of the QS ISS, which is the international survey we run every year. And the question we asked was, what is important to an international student when choosing a university? So halfway down the graph, you can see that 29% what's important when choosing a university internationally is it's well ranked. So yeah, tick there. But looking up, what we can see is many of the other aspects which are important when choosing a university are that it's are the measures actually which Lee described in our methodology for the ranking. Now, I think there are certain rankings out there which get a lot of traffic. The World University Rankings is one. There's several others out there, but it's usually the main ranking, which is actually incorporating all the important aspects which is important to a student when choosing a university, which gets the most attention, the most traffic. And I think this graph sort of illustrates, what's really important. So next, we actually internally did a pulse survey last year on environmental issues, SDG issues, on students and their feelings on SDGs. And the survey was responded to by 3,700 people. And those are international students who are looking to study abroad. And the question we asked, and I've extracted a couple of these questions that we were asked, but the first one being how prospective international students feel about higher education sector's sustainability efforts. So we asked, when they're choosing a degree, if they learned within that degree more about reducing the environmental impact, then would it affect their decision when choosing that course? As we can see here, over 80% of students, international students, said that they're either much more likely or somewhat more likely to choose a course if they were to learn more about how to reduce the environmental impact. So this was an eye-opener, and the next question we also asked was how important it is to a student that the university that they're at actually takes action to reduce its environmental impact. And again, we can see over 88% said that it's either essential or very important that university is doing effort and taking action to reduce its environmental impact. So we can see it's not only enough when they're choosing a degree that it's important the university cares about the environment, but also that when they're at the university that it's actually taking action as well when they're at. We also looked at other research that's been done in this area, and I've extracted one particular piece of research here. This is the Princeton Review's College Hopes and Worries survey from earlier this year. And what's interesting from this angle as well, it asks students, but also asks parents. So the few takeaways from this are that over 66% of students are somewhat or very much or strongly affected by their decision when choosing a university, of how much it's like they're affected in the way that they'd like to know what the commitment to green issues, i.e. SDG issues, the university is doing. So another takeaway is that, and we can see on the not at all chart, actually there's a little difference between what parents are thinking and what students are thinking. So parents are thinking, nearly 15% of parents are saying that it's not at all important when choosing a university that when you're comparing those universities on the basis of their commitment to green issues, and it's 8% of students which are saying it's not at all important. So I think there is definitely, and we know this anyway from elsewhere, there's definitely a difference in opinion depending on who you're asking, and different generations and different positions within and purposes, let's say, in the world. One more perspective, we actually asked several questions in our academic survey, which contributes towards the World University Rankings, and we ask extra questions and thought leadership questions in that survey. And one of the questions was, how important is it to the academic that their institution takes action to reduce its environmental impact? And overwhelmingly, the majority of academics are saying it's essential, very important, that the institution takes environmental impact. So I think, it's not enough that everyone's saying this. I think we had to present all this to the CEO and to all the other stakeholders at QS. The CEO of QS commented early on this year that QS is committed, so Nunzio Quaccarelli, QS is committed to CSR as an organization, as demonstrated by our carbon neutral certification. And we are committed to categorizing universities and business schools which are the most socially responsible within our rankings. So we do have the commitment there. And I think one aspect is that it's great that maybe we're going to try and advise students and help them when choosing their choice of university based on SDG issues. But what's also important is that QS is at the forefront as well of SD issues, and we're putting thought leadership into the space, and internally we are taking action. So here are some of the actions that QS has taken recently. We are a carbon neutral certified company. We run several conferences each year, and I've listed a few of them: Reimagine Education, along with the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania; QS Apple, which is aimed at educational, bringing together all types of academics in Asia; and Edu Data Summit, where we discuss sort of how to use data in higher education. And all three of these conferences this year are focusing on sustainability issues, which is a major step forward considering these conferences have been running for several years. There's also the QS Global Educational newsletter that we run. And we are more and more talking about sustainability issues in the newsletter. Lastly, QS has actually been running for around a year now the World Merit Charity. And the World Merit Charity supports students, citizens who contribute to achieving the SDG goals through their work with communities, that's locally and globally. For anyone interested, as QS Apple is around the corner, there's a link there if you want to register, and I'm sure you'll get the slides afterwards to have that link as well. Yeah, I mean, before I pass it over to Drew, to sum up, you can see that there's 70 million visitors to one of our websites each year to visit rankings. So they are useful. But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to jump in and make a new ranking because we can see the evidence is pointing towards sustainability SDG issues as being more and more important to students. So over to Drew, who's going to explain a little bit more about the initial phases and future phases of this project.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. Yes, and good afternoon, good evening again to everybody. I'm Drew, the Rankings Manager here at QS. So just to sort of reiterate a thread that Daniel was outlining there, thinking about SDGs and planning to work with them is not a new idea for QS. As a company, you know, we've been thinking and doing stuff in the SDG sphere for over a year. You know, we got carbon neutral, World Merit Charity. Incorporating them into sort of an evaluation sphere, rankings and ratings, that is the more recent endeavor we're undertaking. And I hope it was clear from both Lee and Daniel's parts of the presentation that we're at the stage of being inquisitive and curious. We're seeking expert feedback on how we do this, and we're not dogmatic about the approach that we are taking. As Daniel mentioned, it's become a hot topic for students in institutions, particularly sort of a younger generation of prospective students that QS is set up to serve. Institutions are now opening, you know, offices of sustainability. They're recruiting directors of sustainability, and we're seeing that happening much more widely. So it would be tempting possibly to be slightly reactive to that and just create a new ranking, but that is not really what we're planning to do. What are we planning to do? What do we want to achieve? Well, first, to collect useful information that comes from valid and legitimate sources to help students make informed decisions through an SDG lens. What do I mean? Well, I think we can be realistic and honest that apart from a minority of students, most of them will decide to go to a university based on its academic strength and its academic excellence. However, once they've made that sort of macro decision, they'll look at other things to help guide their decision. So for students that are particularly interested or concerned with inequalities in the world, they would like to know what an institution is doing to try and meet, you know, reduced inequalities, SDG 10. If a student was more interested in, for example, responsible consumption, they might look for a university that is doing really good work in that sphere. So it's an added lens with which to choose a university. Secondly, we want to engage institutions without being a burden. In some of the internal conversations we've been having at QS, when we think about the wealth of data we could collect from institutions, you know, their recycling facilities, do they have vegan catering options, their gender policies in terms of research and hiring, etc. The list could be possibly endless. We don't want to be a burden. We want to help institutions benchmark either in themselves from year to year, benchmark between other institutions, regionally, globally, but doing that in a way that makes sense and is achievable for them. We want to create a bespoke methodology guided by our academic advisory board, and I should add by experts in the field, such as those represented by ISCN. Our advisory board is a global board made up of academics all over the world, and we invite new members into that board as and when we sort of diversify the market activities that we're doing, and moving into sort of evaluation of SDGs is part of that, and we'd be looking to gain more expertise in the advisory board on that too. We want to compare like for like. So, for example, there might be small institutions, liberal arts and sort of social science humanities institutions doing really, really great work in gender inequality. So we'd want to be able to shine a light on them for what they're doing and not allow that to be dwarfed, for example, by a huge tech institution producing many hundreds of thousands of citations in climate change, or the ability to invest huge resources in that type of effort. And we want to simplify the SDGs for our audience. You know, we're designed for students and institutions. Navigating through 17 different SDGs to help make your university decision is a bit unwieldy. So we want to break that down into more manageable categories, and I'll show you that just next. So, phase one of our approach, which is where we're at kind of now and looking to get immediate feedback on, is working with our partners at Elsevier, and in particular their informatics service, SciVal, to incorporate their already created SDG research insights. So as many of you will know, Elsevier SciVal have been working for some time now, a couple of years, on getting tailored SDG mappings from their research data. They consulted with experts in the field to create these particular keyword searches. There's an example of that in a following slide. So we've asked Elsevier to provide us with this research SDG data for the institutions we represent in the World University Ranking, and we will fold them into 5 macro categories. In future, of course, we want to expand out from that to research the performance of institutions themselves against the different development goals. Again, allowing students this lens, an extra lens over which to view the institutions. The future phase, very much open to consultation with experts in the field. Slide, please. So, as I said, Elsevier, in conjunction with experts, created keyword searches for each of the SDGs. Anybody with access to SciVal can do this. You can log in, you can click on the SDG box, which is highlighted on that right graphic that you can see in the slide, and there are the 16 SDGs. 17, the partnership one is not represented there. So there's keywords like microfinance, environmental education, early childhood education, water treatment, domestic violence, feminism. And they've all been mapped with experts, and we are planning to use these existing mappings from Elsevier in our work. Slide, please. So if we just take a look at the data extract that we have, it's possibly no surprise that SDG 3, good health and well-being, accounts for the bulk, somewhere around 70+% of the papers and citations that we have on these SDGs. But that's not the only story. So for example, we find that the area with the most growth has been in sustainable consumption, sustainable cities, responsible consumption, sorry. And the area with the most field-weighted citation impact, clean energy. So there are different ways of looking at the data depending on the SDGs that are of interest. As an aside, it's slightly disappointing as an education company when we realize that the least field-weighted impactful area is in quality education. It's an education company, that is not ideal. But you can see there the sort of diversity and spread of the different SDGs. Next slide, please. So we plan to group them, and this is our proposed grouping here. Again, to make it a sort of user experience a lot more smooth and meaningful to institutions and students. So we have basic rights with 3 SDGs, equal opportunity, human potential, environmental impact, a larger parent group there with 6 SDGs, and power of organizations. And so we will draw in the research citations and papers for the SDGs, put them into a parent group, and use that as an added layer of insight for students. Slide, please. So what are our next steps? Well, I think the first big question that we are asking as a company, and we want feedback on, is where should we shine a light? SDGs are massively broad, complex, and it would be fruitful to know where to put focus and intensity on. So that's one question we have for you all. What insights would help your institutions in benchmarking and developing strategy and policy? What's missing from the sustainability conversation? You know, there's a conversation that is ongoing, and we know that different partners and different companies are working in it. What's missing? I might just add quickly that we're planning to use these SDG research metrics as an overlay for students on our existing rankings as an added layer of insight. So before I hand back to Alexander and Christina, I'll just ask you to email us at rankings@qs.com with the subject SDG ISCN, just so we can absolutely make sure that they get treated with the level of care and consideration required. So over to Alexander and Christina, and thank you.
Thank you very much for this great presentation. So please don't hesitate to ask all your questions in the Q&A box. Christina, would you like to take maybe the first question? I have other questions here also in case.
Yes, thank you so much, Alexander. We have a question here. We see that students are more interested in sustainability than their parents. That helps them to choose university. After the students have started at the university and find out that they can work with the SDGs, they often choose to work within the projects. I would like you to tell you about our mega projects.
Okay,
So
this is more of a remark.
Yes, but that is also important. It's from Berthe. Okay.
Then Mark. Maybe one question regarding this step number 1 in terms of bibliometrics. Are you planning to do any normalization by size of university? Do you have any ideas that would make the comparison more even?
Yes, so I should say that we use Elsevier's data for our existing rankings. Almost all of our rankings have research components in them. And we do normalize. We normalize across faculty areas, and we normalize at country level. So exactly how we create that final calculation is still an open question. Normalizing by size of institution is an idea. It's not something that we've settled on or have an answer on. But we do have a sort of in-house way of looking at citations. Thank
you very much. If I may, Christina, I have another question maybe that I would like to convey to QS. This is actually a question that was addressed to THE last week by our colleagues from the CESA network. And I would like to address it to you as well, since it relates to bibliometrics as well. So quote, although the methodology for the bibliometric evaluation is published and institutions are invited to nominate additional keywords, there are some concerns that key publications are not captured, and also that some institutions have more resources than others to model the bibliometrics and potentially improve their rankings by encouraging colleagues to include specific keywords in their publication. So how do you, QS, plan to tackle this problem of not having universities with more resources bias this whole exercise of identification of keywords?
I can maybe say something briefly on that, and maybe some of my colleagues could say more. So we're planning to use the keywords that Elsevier are creating with the experts in the industry. We have not proposed to create separate keyword searches in conjunction with any institutions. So in that sense, we're relying on Elsevier really for quality checking and consulting with the experts to make sure that those keywords are an accurate representation of the work being done in SDGs. And of course, like any responsible rankings company, we would be taking feedback from partners and institutions when we do such an approach and feed it back to who we're working with. But I think at the moment, that's all I could say on that. It's probably premature to give any more detail because we're not there yet. I don't know if Lee or Daniel has anything to say on that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a lot more to say on that, but I mean, as we sort of all know, that way of tracking that data is actually quite new. So, you know, in terms of concerns that certain institutions may be sort of gaming the system or something in some way, or you know, maximizing their sort of potential where others are unable to at the moment, is probably not really a problem right now. But over the coming years, I absolutely can see how that could be a concern. So we don't have a complete answer on how that will be tackled, but it's definitely a question we'll consider with our academic advisory board, because, you know, I can see that becoming problematic in the future.
And I've seen a lot of different organizations get together and try to come up with the keywords in their way, either through AI, either through doing surveys. We've been working with Elsevier for a number of years, so it was a natural choice to work with them and this project as well. But there were options out there. I know that SDSN have their own keywords. I think the Australian branch, the Aurora project in the Netherlands, have come up with their own keywords to tackle the citations within the databases as well. So again, I think there's no right answer, but I think it was safer for us to go through the experts and also our partners as well.
Yeah, one other thing I just want to add is we're not talking about ranking institutions. So I think that granularity of information that could really influence outcomes quite a lot is not going to cause quite the same level of impact that it would in some of the other evaluations we see out there that are explicitly rankings using this information.
Okay, thank you so much for the answer. Then we also have a question from David Bumert, and he's representing CISAR, a network in Europe for technical universities. Why did you not take the SDSN aggregation of the 17 SDGs to say 6 transformations to achieve the SDGs?
Yeah, I mean, it was discussed internally, and again, we're not there yet, but obviously what we want are words which are useful to candidates to really segment when they're doing the research, the keywords, let's say, which speak out to candidates, applicants. We also discussed the 5 Ps, so as well, people, I've forgotten them all, people, peace, prosperity. There's, at the UN have segmented the 17 by that as well. So it wasn't that we're not using SDSN because it's SDSN, or we're not using the 5 Ps because of that. It was more, we felt these were more aligned with what we wanted to achieve.
Yeah, I think to just add to that, we felt they speak to our particular audience a lot better. That language spoke a bit better, and the way that's categorized, addresses some concerns that have come up in other research we've conducted with those audiences. So that's straightforward why we've gone with that approach for the time being.
I would just like to add that you also have a possibility to collaborate together with the UN, because I know that Times Higher Education Impact have asked the UN, the organization that is working with the SDGs in universities, how you can maybe put these different kinds of sustainability in different categories. So that could be one possibility for you. And then, of course, they have a lot of knowledge, so they can for sure support you.
Yeah, absolutely. There's sort of conversations we're sort of having separately.
Thank you very much. Next question, how will you choose publications for SDG number 17? THE chose co-publication with lower income countries. Do you have any ideas on the specific SDG number 17?
The short answer is no. We don't have an answer for that yet. Stay tuned.
very specific questions, obviously.
Yeah, and actually I would encourage, I mean, we put the email address up before, rankings@qs.com. That's precisely looking for suggestions, you know, input on this to help us make some of these decisions. So please, whoever was asking that question, you know, look forward to hearing from you.
And I would like to emphasize this is a dialogue, and you're still in the early stage. So QS obviously welcomes all your feedbacks. Christina, would you like to take the next question from Sylvia?
Yes, thank you, Sylvia. We have a question here. As future engineers and scientists, students need to develop the knowledge and the skills to address the multitude of challenges related to sustainability. You're focusing strongly on research and publications. How will QS try to rank how well academic institutions are teaching students these skills needed to address sustainability and climate change challenges that humanity is facing today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So as Drew was really talking about, we're looking at this in different phases. So our first approach is looking through that research lens. With that, we're looking at the impact of institutions externally, primarily. That's the real focus of that. Some of the student insights that Daniel shared with us sort of start to imply that there is, of course, an appetite to understand how institutions are doing things, within their organizations, sort of on campus, also how things are being integrated into the sort of learning curriculum and so forth for students. So they're elements we're going to look at in a later phase of this project, but it is something that's sort of considering as part of the phase 2, how to answer some of those questions, because we do realize we're just looking at one, relatively narrow aspect in this first phase.
And I've noticed when you start asking an institution what percentage of your courses are related to sustainability, I've heard answers, oh, all of it is. It's all integrated into all our courses. So it's not. It's a good question, and I wish there was a simple answer. And I've seen other ranking agencies take that question, and I've seen universities, business schools abuse that question in that way. So, a lot of our rankings are based on publicly available data and not data directly given by institutions. So I think when we're investigating this further on, in terms of the teaching and the percentage of courses related to sustainability, we might be looking at more, let's say, more intelligent ways, and maybe using AI to look at other ways of judging this, which leaves or shuts the door to twisting of the data, let's say. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you so much for this answer. I would just like to add that I can see one thing that the universities are struggling with is how you should look at the progression in your program and courses. So that is something maybe that is important to highlight, because that is something also that the students tell us that they don't see the progression. So that is very interesting, and maybe it could be a topic to discuss in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting point. We'll have to definitely look at that area.
And Ilka just wrote a quick follow-up on Sylvia's question. Quote, I would also like to mention the key competences for ESD, Education for Sustainability Development, which I feel are often left out. So this is more of a remark about the ESD, which I don't know, but I don't know if maybe you guys have had a look into this.
Yeah, we'll take that away and look at it.
Yeah. And maybe another question from Rona. Can we obtain the list of keywords Elsevier are using to produce data for QS? Obviously, in relation to sustainability, is it the same list used by THE? Question mark.
Yeah.
I think we had the same question this morning.
Yeah, so if you go on to scival.com/SDG, there's a link to download all the keyword searches from Mendeley, which is where it's stored. So we've asked for this data for our World University Rankings institutions. So it's necessarily going to be different to how other people would extract it, but the keywords at least are the same.
Thank you. Christina, if I may, I would like to ask a question that I've asked this morning that might be useful for the audience. When do you plan to integrate this piece of work into your global ranking?
Yeah, so with this first phase, we're hoping to roll it out for our World University Rankings in 2021. So they're due to be launched in June. So it's going to be pretty quickly, that first phase is going to be rolled out. In terms of a second phase, we think it is going to be quite a longer term project to develop, appropriate metrics. So it's a little bit open at this stage when the next development of that will come to, into public domain.
We hope it's before 2030, otherwise there'll be some new goals to...
And I think we've answered your question, Leila, that you've asked through the chat. Christina, would you like to take any other questions? I see that.
I have another question. I could see that you have different rankings for different part of the word. Is that something that you would like to continue to work with? So also the SDGs is more for Asia or for different parts of Europe and so on? Because that has been a question concerning the methodology when we are talking with Times Higher Education Impact Ranking, that of course is difficult to take or to look at that we have different culture and different legislation and so on. Can you already see that it should be ranking that is more for different part of the world?
Yeah, I suppose the fact that we're not doing a ranking, what we're going to do is we're taking our existing rankings and going to put an overlay over that. Sort of answers that. So our first part of that is just looking at the World University Ranking. And this is really because it's more of a pilot than anything else to sort of see, make sure it works properly. I think the vision would be to roll it out across all of our different rankings over time. So, you know, we can look at those different regional sort of snapshots in isolation when we need to.
Okay, thank you. Do you have some more questions, Alexander?
No, I think all the people are addressing their questions to Trump and Biden by at this time. So no more question at this stage. Would you like to wrap up maybe, Christina?
Yes, thank you so much. Then we have our slides we can share. And I will take away this one. Okay. Yes, first of all, I would like to thank all the participants, and also, of course, a special thank to QS for this great presentation you have had, both in the morning and the presentation you had in the evening. And I think it's very interesting for us working with sustainability issues that we can share your thoughts and the next step in the work you are going to do. And also, as a member of ISCN network, we would like to invite all the participants, but of course also QS, to continue this dialogue, because we think it's so important that if we want to have a sustainability future, we need to work together, hand in hand, to really see how we can improve the work that the universities is doing about sustainability work. And then I think I heard some keywords for me. I was thinking about integration, because one very important issue for the universities is how we integrate sustainability into education, research, collaboration, but also other business processes as procurement, buildings, and so on. So in the long run, I think that is also very important for your work, that it needs to be integrated in the work you are doing, of course. So this will be a natural part, sustainability. So it will include, I think that is very important. And then I think also, of course, what you are contributing with is that this work, sustainability work, has to be on an international level. So we as universities also can come together and also evaluate the work we're doing and continues the work with improvements. So I see this as a very important step for the sustainability work at universities. So therefore, I would like to thank you again, and I'm looking forward to have more meetings with you when you have worked more with your way of looking at sustainability issues. And then also, of course, that we can collaborate on different topics, because you send some questions to us, you address them, and we will look at them and come back to you, of course. So we are very, very happy that we have the possibility to influence the work you are doing, so we can also see how we can move forward. And then I think we will see if we have some more questions coming on, then we will send them to you, to QS, and then we also will looking for new dates when we can have meetings in the future. Would you like to add something, Alexander?
No, thank you again, Andrew, Daniel, and Lee, for sharing your work. Thank you all for joining us today. Two maybe last remarks. This session has been recorded and will be available through ISCN website. And there will be, if you'd like to take 1 minute, a short survey on this session available through Zoom. And we would be very grateful if you would take part in this little survey. Thank you all very much, and have a great day or great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.